Hello everyone, welcome to our January Wednesday webinar. I'm here with Ray Gould, who will be presenting on audio. He is a film and television, he's worked in film and television for sound for over 10 years. He is the co-host for an official Unity user group in Ottawa. He spends a lot of time learning about game dev when he's not working on sound. And he has his own game audio company specializing in sound and music for games and interactive media. Ray, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Tristan. Hi, everybody. My name is Ray Gould, and welcome to the webinar. Thanks a lot for coming out. Right off the bat, I would say that we're going to aim at about 45 minutes and have about 15 minutes for questions afterwards. So if you have a burning question, try and keep track of it yourself, and we'll have time for that at the end. If there aren't any questions for whatever reason, we'll just finish up early. So to begin with, this webinar is for independent game producers, designers, and developers who need to outsource audio. And I'm going to start off assuming that you've never done that before, and so that if you have, you may know some of this stuff already. So the first approach that I've been aware of for using outsource audio was what a lot of people refer to as the over-the-wall system. I won't be talking about that much. First of all, because it doesn't need too much discussion. The game studio makes an asset list. They send it to the audio provider. The audio provider sends the audio clips back to the game, and everyone's done. Secondly, I believe we're moving away from this paradigm. There's several reasons for this. I think starting off with the players, they're seeking immersive experiences, which sound is particularly suited for. The word cinematic is being thrown around a lot. And you'll notice that even sound designers from the film world are doing games, and the bar is being set fairly high as a result. This makes sense since we get a lot of expectations of what sounds and visuals are from films. The other side of it is that the old style grew out of the state of the technology at the time. Programming sound very specialized at the beginning of games. There were very few, if any, audio people that could do that kind of thing. You're making things like stereo and mono files from lines of code. I mean, it really wasn't an audio job. Sound designers are using a lot more programming in their designs as well. It's a lot easier for them to implement their own sound or to collaborate with implementers. And I'm not just talking about using middleware. There's also the idea that there's a lot of game engines that are available. Some of them are free, and they have huge communities support. So this is all leading to kind of a larger trend, I think, for the professional sound designer implementer. This is a really great thing for games, I feel, since the communication between the original sound designer's idea and what actually ends up in the game is a lot shorter. I think everything is moving towards more of a collaborative approach, and the rise of the sound designer programmer is really helping that. There's some benefits to this for game developers and producers, is that now they can just concentrate on what they want to concentrate on, which is implementing the visuals and the game mechanics. I think overall that the result, and you can see this when you play a game, is that the games are more connected. The sound is more connected to the gameplay. So, getting to the main topic of the webinar is, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding between non-sound people and sound people. The first thing I notice is that really good sound design, especially when it's done well, is like a type of magic. Think about how things that we take for granted is we believe that sounds are coming from the objects that we see on screen. Well, this is kind of amazing, because really what we have is sound coming out of speakers and a picture moving across the screen. They're not actually connected at all. Unlike when you say you record sound for a film, at least you're getting sound from objects. It's usually not picked up very well on set. You're getting the actual sound, whereas with a game, there's no intrinsic sound to the visuals. The two aspects of this that create the problem are, from the technical point of view, is how is this trick done? Simply put, it's a combination of audio clips and scripts. But the scripts are really everything when it comes to the final product. Kind of another trend is, if you remember some of the older games, they did just trigger an audio clip to play. It would play out, and that would be that. The others, but now there's much more interaction with the sounds, and they adapt. The other problem that comes up is a creative one, which is sound by its very nature is a nonverbal type of communication. So how do you communicate the nonverbal? And we'll look at a little bit about how to do that later. The next point I make was the relationship between the audio team and the game studio. I think this causes a lot of stress on both sides sometimes, but I want to point out that the main purpose, the main task of the audio team is to bring the game designer's vision to fruition. And they have to do it, of course, the way the producer wants, because they're paying the bills. So, in a situation where people have made a game and it's their game, and all of a sudden you have this extra set of people that are going to have a major impact on the outcome. So, the first thing I think that's very important is to have obviously like a first meeting, but more importantly, that's the meeting where you set all your technical and creative goals. For this reason, I think that an audio lead must be present, of course, but also all the interested parties. That's the game producer, probably the game designer, and possibly the lead programmer. And the reason why I include the programmer is, as we'll see as we go along, I really feel like these tasks should not be separated too soon. So the main things that we're trying to establish in this meeting are, well, I guess the first one would be how much input do you want from the audio lead, and what of input. Some people, they have a very firm idea. They really don't want creative direction from the sound team. They just want them to carry out the creative direction that they've already established. But other times, teams have very little idea of what they want. They may have some idea that they want it to be good and this sort of thing, but it's very vague. Want the audio person to basically kick in with the creative side as well. But I think the real troubling part is when that this relationship is not fully understood. So you really want to have that established first. And if the producers and the designer don't want any creative input from the sound team, then that's the way it should be. If we're really relying on them, then it's up to the sound person to pull out all the stops and and add their own creative personality to it. So maybe just to emphasize one aspect of sound, which is sound for games is different than any other medium because of its interaction. So it's not a question of having good quality sounds. I think that should be kind of a given. Most sound people aspire to have pretty good quality sound, and there's lots of ways to achieve that these days. But for the sound to really succeed, it's going to be implemented. And I really feel that this is key. And so collaborating with the team is really important, and this idea of sending sound assets and not really knowing what's happening to them is should be a thing of the past. I think the first meeting that you have absolutely has to be face-to-face. But that you can have video conferencing on the web. But I think to get things started, you really want to start building a relationship with each other. And I think that's best done face-to-face. So to put it another way, in order for the game and the sound to combine to become more than some of the parts, I think the two teams have to do something kind of similar. Next, to talk a little bit about what it is that we're trying to achieve.
Ray, can I don't mean to interrupt you. Are you switching slides, or are you going through them yet?
Not yet.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, not a problem. So I think we can agree that it's really about the player. He's the final customer, and the one who will be buying more from us and promote us and so on. Now, I spend time, well, as much time as I can actually, casually polling players whenever I have the chance. And the things that I hear about from them are mainly negative. They are that sound is repetitive, predictable, intrusive, and fake is another term that comes up a lot. And I think that these are things that they notice. They notice when the sound is bad. And I think this is an important thing to notice, that they have trouble articulating things about sound as well. And as part of the central issue with sound is that it is hard to articulate, and it's normally seen when it's not working. So at this meeting, we're going to cover the first major hurdle is what's possible. The first thing we need to know, of course, is like, what is the game? What kind of game is it? And by that, I'm talking on two levels: the game genre and the story genre. And along with that, we have to know how important is story, because not every game, almost every game has gameplay, but not every game has story. And this is a very important expectation to get straight right from the beginning. Sound has a very functional role when it comes to gameplay, and it has a very emotional role when it comes to story. So this has a really big impact. We need to know the scope, or how many sounds we're going to have. On a simple mobile game, it might be a few dozen sounds. On a PC game, for a console, or for a PC rather, you may have, for instance, 5,000 to 10,000 lines of dialogue. So the amount of sounds is going to inform a lot of the next decisions. I'd like to point out that no matter what type of game or what type of sounds you're using, the main task is kind of the same. So we have to establish what the parameters are and work backwards from there. The other thing to point out about this meeting is I think this is a great opportunity to ask as many questions as possible. It doesn't cost anything, and it can actually save money down the road. I think it's a mistake to rush it. We want to strive for clarity and building the team and getting people invested. The next sort of layer of broad strokes that we want to look at are the artistic style, photorealism versus cartoon. If I didn't have any direction at all and I got visual models, I would probably base my sound design style on those things. But having it come from the designer and the producer themselves can really confirm this. Another side of that is the realism in terms of how the sounds are going to be interpreted. For a simulation type of game, for instance, you want them to sound almost the same as they do in the real world. But for most games, there's more of what they call a hyper-realist approach, where things are very exaggerated and probably enhanced. So that's another important style question. The other question in terms of style are how do you approach the narrative? For instance, for very realistic and adult games, the narration is going to be pretty much straight one-to-one when you see a car, and so on. For something that's a little more cartoony, you might see a character jumping up and down, but the sound might be the sound of a ball bouncing. So there's that level of narration. It's more interpretive and metaphoric. So now that we know the broad strokes, we want to look at what the final sound is going to look like and how much sound we think we're going to need. So I'll just go over quickly what the main sound categories are. The three big ones are dialogue, sound effects, and music. But also these can be broken down further. Dialogue can be, well, most people would think of character dialogue, so anything that comes out of a character's mouth. The narrator, which is any kind of voiceover. A lot of games feedback, it's like instructions or encouragement in the case of games. The sound effects can also be ambiances or backgrounds. They can be UI sounds. They can be hard sound effects, Foley sounds, which are the sounds that people make, like footsteps and clothing. The music can also be broken down into score and what's sometimes called source music, where the music is coming from some object in the scene, as opposed to where it's just it's from nowhere, like the voiceover is. There's other considerations around this time, which is how dynamic is the sound system. Dynamic music systems are really common now. This is where the music it changes over time. It adapts based on various things. Maybe it's the player health or the scene changes, changes of location. Sound effects can be dynamic as well, and I'm a really big fan of that. I find this makes them attach to the objects much better. Let's see, there's also things like, if you have motion capture, the best method to address this is to capture the dialogue at the same time. If for whatever reason the dialogue has to be re-recorded, then it's referred to ADR, automatic dialogue replacement. And another consideration is, are we inheriting any sounds? Is this a pre-existing IP? are getting sounds or music from somewhere else. Another consideration at this stage is where's the quality bar. This is another opportunity for misunderstandings, and I think it's hard for someone to say, I don't really want very good quality, but sometimes that's actually what they want. They just want to get the thing done, and they don't want people to spend their life trying to refine the sounds. But on the other hand, they may have very high standards as far as the sounds making a statement. They want the sounds to be iconic. They want the music themes to be very familiar and quickly known to other parties. You might also come across the term cinematic quality. This usually translates into a lot of layers. It's another kind of quality metric. I think really what all this kind of translates down to, though, is what percentage of budget are you dedicating to sound? And this, of course, has the financial budget and the CPU processing resources budget. And I think the important thing, again, is to have them realistically connected. If you think you're going to get a really big dynamics experience from the sound, but you're not dedicating much CPU power to it, that needs to be addressed at this point, and we have to readjust our goals. As I've been leading up to, I think implementation is a big topic to get right at the beginning. Who and when the sounds are going to be implemented by. Whether or not you have an onboard sound person who's going to be the main audio implementer, I believe that there has to be a collaboration between the audio lead and this person. I've found that even when using middleware, what middleware does is it simplifies but the sounds still need to be integrated. So this is the kind of decision that has to be made as a team from the beginning, and they have to be on board. I can imagine scenarios where the development team would be pretty horrified to hear that the sound person is working on code. But if the development team is overworked, they may appreciate some heavy lifting from the sound team. But these are all details that have to be worked out. And ultimately, it's going to result in how the sounds are going to be packaged. So what am I actually delivering? Am I delivering a folder full of audio clips? This happens all the time. Are there going to be scripts involved? In the case of middleware, they will be sound banks, and so on. I guess connected with this discussion is how much variation would be needed. Do you need an array of sounds for each event? There's no point in creating a whole bunch of sounds that are and you're only going to trigger one at a time and ignore the rest. From the advantage for the sound team, I think this point is to know what kind of game states are pre-existing. If anytime I've had the opportunity to work with implementation, I usually like to start off with what I think of as being pre-existing. In other words, the dev team is already making choices. If an object is flying through the air, they're measuring the velocity and the position of the objects. These are things that we can hook into for the sound. The next consideration at the beginning would be the type of sound team. There's an awful lot of sound people, sound jobs that can be done. I think I would start off, without going through them all first, I would start off by saying probably a good point is a three-man team. This is based on how sound works and also what are the main tasks that need to be done. So let me describe that to you. With a three-man team, you would have each audio person would be in charge of dialogue, sound effects, or music. Then one of them will end up being the audio lead, usually the dialogue person or the sound effects person. And that could end up being just who's the busiest. If there's a lot of dialogue, then maybe the sound effects person should be the audio lead and vice versa. So this allows all three of them to work concurrently, and then they can each attend their respective recording sessions and mix sessions and do the edits for their sound category. The audio lead is the person who's been at this meeting that we've been talking about and will be listening in all other sessions. For the most part, unless the game is very small, you'll need to the audio lead will have to subcontract engineers and studios. The dialogue person will probably work with a talent agency and hire actors and handle their contracts. Typically, I would say the dialogue editor also has the advantage that they tend to be pretty good paper trackers, so it could be a very good fit for them to become the dialogue editor, or sorry, the audio lead. Now, if the game is quite small, you might actually be only one person. If you had at least two people, then I would split between sound effects and music, and this way these can be worked on simultaneously. If time is not of the essence, then a single person can do them both one after another. But this could take a really long time depending on how much music is needed. So although I'm capable of doing sound and music, I would probably opt to hire at least one other person if I needed to do sound effects. I would hire one other composer and vice versa. So before I get completely off the topic of the audio lead, I would say that one of the obligations I feel is that they should be talking about taking all the information that we've talked about until now and cautioning with some of the pitfalls. It's easy to assume that everybody understands that work can be derailed in certain ways, but I think it's important for them to clarify as much as possible what the repercussions of the choices that they're making at this point. Also, before we get completely out of the first meeting, we have to discuss how the mix is going to be done. There's several paradigms for this. For the largest type of game, probably the best scenario you could hope for is you're going to have a main mix, and this is going to be attended by the interested parties, and also going to take place in-game, which is a fairly easy thing to do with middleware, and you can even hook up a console to the game, to the middleware, and all the sounds are being mixed in context. This is pretty much the best way to do it that I'm aware of. Moving to the next level down would be to put all the sounds into an audio program, all the audio clips that is, and have some scheme for playing them back. A video capture of someone playing the game might work. and then re-exporting the printed volume graphs. The only other possibility is to pre-mix everything before delivery and then do some kind of offline mixing in the game engine. Right now, Unity has, in the last year and a half, been working a bit on their audio side. There's a mixer built into Unity now, and you can change parameters in real time and save your changes. And this is way better than it used to be. It's actually pretty cool, but it's just lacking that one feature of being able to do it with the control surface and doing it in real time. Also, it's probably not feasible to have a lot of people attending that type of a mix. So I'm going to move on to communication. So this is, if you recall, the second big problem that I was referring to at the beginning, is how do we talk about something that is inherently nonverbal? I like to paraphrase I can't remember who actually said this, but it's talking about sound is like singing about architecture. I think that really says it best for me, but you could also say show, don't tell. When it comes to describing sounds, a lot of misunderstandings can be created. Not only are you not communicating what you mean, you could actually be accidentally communicating things that you don't mean. So I think the best way, especially at the beginning, is with pictures, if you have any art from the game yet, the story scripts, the design document, of course, any animations, and these types of things from the studio. From the audio side, it should be fairly simple examples, especially if you have a rough idea of what kind of game it is. You could bring examples of the sounds that you've worked on that you think might be appropriate. And I think that it's very productive to develop your own language about sound, so that you have sounds that you're actually listening to together, and then you describe them, and sort of a language will grow out of this. Excuse me. Maybe the next pertinent thing is using placeholders. And I have a bit of an idea about placeholders that is not common for some reason. I don't know why. But I think the best way to approach placeholders sounds is for the sound team to provide those sounds. This has a few advantages. If for whatever reason the sounds are good and the studio really loves them, they can just use them straight away. You're probably aware of the problem of using unlicensed things, sounds or music in your game. This can actually, things can get left in a game, which is not common, but it does happen. You can, how do I put it? You get too imprinted with the other sound, and maybe that from that point on, everything that the sound team comes up with is always being judged by not being the sound that was used as the placeholder. So a good workaround to that is to start off with sounds from the sound people to begin with. The other thing I think is good to develop it, speaking in terms of more of emotion and pacing, as opposed to trying to describe sound terms. It might surprise some people, but I think sound designers and musicians who are drawn to visual mediums like games, this is actually how they think anyway. They might talk about things like key signatures and scales when they're talking to each other. It is a language that they use, but to communicate ideas quickly. But as far as the creative side, it's much more about the emotion and the feeling that you're trying to create, the end product. Now I've noticed that when I work with developers, they actually, the ones that I've worked with actually feel the same way. It's best, they seem to prefer that if I want to describe a task like a character flying in a game, they want to hear that the person pushes a button, the character starts to fly, they can steer them with the joystick and so on. But if I were to approach that by telling them how to code, I think it just muddles the whole situation. Another point for communication I think that's very important that gets lost a lot is connecting the right people. It seems a lot of time is unfortunately wasted when there's people who can't actually make decisions are present, and I think it's good to establish who has the final say for any particular task. I can imagine a stereotype situation where a producer might say, if you ask the producer what they want, they'll say they just need a few sounds, and it's probably not going to be too much trouble. But if you talk to the game designer, they may have a big epic score in mind. And if you were to talk to the developer, they may say, well, just use as few clips as possible at the lowest bit rate. Now, who's right? Have to figure that out first, and don't rely on relation. The third point for under communication is how do we keep track of this? How do we track it? And I think along with that is who does approvals and how are the quality checks done. Right now is a great time to be leveraging the internet with Skype and FaceTime and so on. Another possibility is something, well, depending on where you're from, hoteling. This is where the audio lead can pack up a small audio system and task in the studio, and then you have instant feedback, and you can take advantage of what I've heard sometimes referred to as like water cooler talk. This is where some of the great ideas are actually brought up just by chance, by physically in the same building. I think it's important to have regular meetings. I like a once a week, even if it's only for a few minutes. These meetings can be either a few minutes or they can be an hour, but by checking in every week, it creates a nice rhythm. People can build up questions and know, instead of getting an email like 3 times in one day and nothing for 2 weeks, we have a regular flow of information back and forth. Version control is something that developers use a lot. I found it doesn't work as well for audio for some reason. So that's something that has to be decided, how we're actually going to transfer the audio files. I like to keep shared documents as much as possible to track changes, and it keeps things available so that you can check. You can actually answer a lot of your own questions by having them shared. So moving on to protocols. I think the first protocol that must be established is between the implementer and the audio lead is naming conventions. This can really make or break larger projects. It's not as important on small projects, but as I was mentioning, the larger audio clip counts on console games or PC games, it can really become inefficient. So getting and establishing a consistent naming convention at the beginning is critical. Then you want a spreadsheet of some kind to track progress as the lines are recorded and edited, mixed, and delivered. I think it's also in this topic to be aware of who's responsible for what. There can be a lot of waste time when it's not fully understood who's responsible to fix problems. If you're delivering something, is it expected that the other person may need to fix things, or do they have to have it delivered in a certain format? A common one for audio, of course, is sample rate and file format. By having this as a protocol sheet that's shareable, everyone can get at it. At some point, it's very easy for someone who doesn't know anything about audio to be speaking to a studio and have to tell what kind of file format to deliver. It's just nice to be able to check that easily. After that, I would look at approvals and decisions. And we've kind of touched on this, but who's doing what? We've kind of had to figure out, is the audio lead making creative decisions, or must they always defer to someone else? Once things are delivered, are they going to be checked, or are they going to be just put into the game? So these are really important things to get clear. As I'll look at in other places later on in the webinar, making sure that the decision makers are in the right place at the right time can make things very efficient, or rather lack of that could make things really tough. So if you know that the producer wants to sign off on every line of dialogue, then they really need to be at the recording sessions. And if they can't be there in person, they should at least be there online and listening in. Sorry, I'm just going to check the time. So I'm running out of time a bit, so I'll just try and push through the last few points a little quicker. So budget considerations. The first thing is to just have a really good idea of what's most important to you and be sure that that's what's being created first. I'd like to start with things like, going back to my band example, you might also start with ambiances, a main music theme, and maybe one type of music padding, and sound effects for any key mechanics. That way, you're using the first budget dollars and the first budget time working on the most important thing. It also makes the game feel like it's already kind of playable. The second point on budget is this idea of using professionals or using amateurs, which can cause a sort of a false economy, since amateurs obviously charge a lot less. Excuse me. So a voice actor that's professional probably is in a union. Again, depending on your geography, they're probably charging $700, $800 an hour, or maybe per session, depending on how it's based. The rate is based. Now, I've felt some pushback on this. I like to work with professional actors if I can, but I also like to work with amateurs. But the main thing to know is what you're getting. I think the professional comes with a certain amount of accountability, and that's a big part of what you're paying for. Amateur actors can actually oftentimes cost more. They spend a lot of studio time. A professional will tend to hit the lines, will get more first takes, let's call it. An amateur can really burn up a lot of the recording time trying to get their parts right. So it's very good to do some kind of objection and to know what's costing you what, what's the real cost behind things. Along those lines, if you are going to work with an amateur, I would say find what is the cheapest work. By that I mean things like rehearsals, and make sure that when the rate is the highest at a recording studio, for instance, that they just hit the ground running. I've already sort of touched on this, but early approvals, the closer the decision maker is to the approval, the more efficient. If they're signing off on lines as they're being recorded, you can save on editing time by not editing the takes that are not being used. A fairly big topic for music is samples. If you don't know what a music mock-up is, most musicians now use samples to record their ideas. From there, it's usually referred to as a mock-up. The idea is that it's going to be re-recorded by live musicians at some point. On the other hand, fully sampled soundtracks are being used all the time. The quality is getting higher. It's getting better and easier for composers to record the finished scores. Now, I would like to say that nothing really is like an orchestra, except an orchestra. But the cost difference is huge. A nice workaround is to use samples and then sprinkle in a few live instruments to give a bit more realism. The last point on budget, I'd say, is to not forget about localization, but to think of it as a separate budget item. Localization has to be considered early because, as kind of a recurring theme through this talk, there are implications. If you're planning on using localization at any point, you can end up costing yourself a lot of money by not taking into consideration early on. So move on to managing expectations. As I was looking at the communication section, we want to make regular milestones where we can keep track of the quality and the work being done. Contracts, of course. I think probably the biggest consideration there is who owns the asset on any given game. Is it a buyout situation, or is the composer going to have some control over copyrights afterwards? For meetings, I like to use summary notes. This is not that common, but I find it's a great way to keep track of who said what, and to a reality check when things when disagreements come up. It's very important to have some provision for what triggers new money. It's very common to make a contract based on a certain understanding, and then the game, as games do, they evolve and change. But it's the the contract must be updated as well. What would you call a revision and what would you call a rewrite? These are things that have to be clarified in the expectation section. I'd like to move on to a little bit of a favorite subject of mine, which is sound prototyping. Again, this is sort of a new thing, but it's interesting that we have development teams using agile models, and then at the end of all that, starting from scratch with the sound team. I think sound prototyping has a lot of advantages. The most part is that it helps keep on budget and on time, and can make making decisions in context a lot easier. I think I'm going to open up the floor to questions now. Sorry, I'm just checking my question.
Do you want me to read them to you, Ray? Would that be easier?
No, I have them now.
Oh, okay.
What's the company called? And somebody already answered, Soundkamera. The question, what program would you recommend for audio? There's several programs. I think Pro Tools is the one that I use the most for my final overall work. I create sounds in it, and I do mixing. Mixing is especially nice in Pro Tools. I also use Ableton Live, which is excellent for prototyping sounds. It has a lot of non-linear approach to sound that is particularly suitable for games. I think having a sampler for the same reason as what I just said about Live is pretty essential. Well, I think that's it for the questions. And oh, how do you spell that? Well, there's Ableton Live, L-I-V-E, and there's the best sampler I can think of is Kontact, K-O-N-T-A-K-A-T, and Protools, P-R-O-T-O-O-L-S. Well, sorry, I went a little bit over time, and I have my contact information at the bottom, so if any of you feel like shooting me a question or have some suggestions for other presentations, by all means let me know. Thanks everybody for listening.